Hello everybody, how are you today? Welcome back to American Textbook Reading. I'm Brian Stuart. Today we're studying from Science book number 3 and we're on lesson 5, Plant Adaptations. So we're taking a look at how plants have changed over time and over different environments. So you will discover how plants change and the types of environments in which plants live. There are many different environments. We'll talk about those in the unit today. So, as usual, let's begin with the vocabulary. What are the words that we can use to help us talk about these things? First, we can see hairy. Hairy plants? Can plants be hairy? Normally when we think about hair, right, we think about the hair on our heads or the hair on an animal like a dog or a horse, right? But hairy plants? Yes, it's possible that some plants seem to have hair. We'll see that, okay? So hairy means having a lot of hair. But plants, of course, don't have hair, but it may look like they have hair. So we'll see that in a little while. So hairy. Flat. Flat is, you could say maybe some people probably say boring countryside. Sorry if you live in a flat area. But flat just means that the land is flat. There's no change. It doesn't go down. It doesn't go up. There are no mountains, no valleys. It's just flat. A flat land having no high or curved parts. Well, curved, I guess, would be curved in the land like this. No, it's all flat. So if you live in an area like farmland, many people live in farmland where the farms need to be flat, so it's easy for the farmer to grow plants there. Many states in America are famous for being flat, like Kansas, Nebraska. Now, people in Kansas and Nebraska might get mad at me, but I'm sorry. But, you know, I grew up in mostly western states. There are many mountains. It's not flat. You know, you have huge mountains. So, but there are many parts of the area, country, that are flat. And that's just what it means. No mountains, no valleys, flat. Lose. Lose. I hope you don't experience this, but it's part of life. Usually we lose something. You can't avoid it. Lose means you do not have something any longer, right? If you have something in your hand, like coins or your favorite toy, and it drops out of your hand, maybe you're not paying attention. You lose it somewhere. You're like, oh no, where did it go? I can't find it. I lost it. Right? That means to lose means that you have lost the thing that you had before. It also happens in the environment. In this picture, lose. What does this picture have to do with lose? Well, maybe they're talking about water. Over time, the land has lost the water. So that could be an idea for this picture. Okay. Freeze. In the wintertime, we know this word very well. That's when it becomes so cold that water changes from a liquid to a solid. It becomes hard and solid because the temperature goes below 0 degrees Celsius. That is the temperature at which water turns from liquid to ice, right? And ice is a hard, cold substance, right? It's solid, right? So to freeze, that's basically what it means to freeze. Of course, it's very cold to do that. Of course, in your home, you can find an example of freezing. Just go to your refrigerator and open the freezer side of your refrigerator. Not the refrigerator side, that's just cold. Open the freezer part where it's really cold and you keep ice and your mom keeps the food that's frozen for later. Okay, good. Here we have a video, a video of something freezing. Well, actually, I could say this is melting, really. This is the opposite of freezing. But it's hard to show a video of freezing because, you know, you have to sit there and watch it, and you may not notice the change very quickly. But here we have a picture of many, what do we call these things, by the way? When water drips down and it's so cold that it freezes as it's dripping down. That's an interesting word. We call these things here, we call them icicles. And there's more than one, so we say, I circled two, so icicles is the plural. But icicles, like ice, and ickle. Not a popsicle. Popsicles, those are delicious. But popsicles are frozen fruit drink, right? Instead of drinking the fruit juice, you freeze it, and it becomes a popsicle. Popsicle. You see the similarity in the words. Popsicle is frozen fruit drink. So if you have a grape popsicle or a watermelon popsicle, right? That's frozen watermelon juice, and it's nice to eat on a hot summer day. But that liquid has frozen into these shapes, in this case, icicle. Okay, our next word is conserve. Very important word. Conserve means to save, right? To keep and protect from loss or waste. Same as I said, to save. Save it. Don't waste it. Waste is the opposite of conserve. You don't want to waste clean water. Unfortunately, clean water is rare in some parts of the world. Some people have a hard time getting clean water that they can drink. And we don't want to waste our resources. We want to conserve them. We want to keep them. Just use them when you need them. Don't just waste them, because one day they may not be available so easily, and it may be difficult to get them. So we should conserve, and we should keep and protect the things that are valuable to us. So conserve, save, or to keep. Okay. Environment. Of course, we should protect the environment. People can say conserve the environment, save the environment, keep the environment clean. So the environment is the natural world. It's the world that's around you. Although, yeah, that's what many people normally, the traditional old thinking of the environment is the natural world. But environment can also mean an industrial or city. That's also an environment. You can say urban environment. That would be a city environment. So environment isn't just the natural world, although many people, when they think about the environment, they talk about let's save the environment, let's protect the environment. They're talking about the natural world, right? Trees, ponds, lakes, waterfalls in this case. Don't destroy it, don't change it, let's preserve it, let's conserve it. Okay, so environment. Close. Now, be careful about this word, because there's two pronunciations, two different meanings, right? In this case, it's close. That means nearby, next to, not far from. But don't get confused, because you could also pronounce this word as close, which is a different meaning, completely different meaning. If the door is open, right, you close the door. So it's the same spelling, but different pronunciations. Close or close. In this case, we're talking about close. It's close by. It's nearby. It's next to, not far from. So hopefully your school is close to your house. Maybe you can walk to your school. You don't have to take a long bus ride. If so, then the school is close to your home, right? Your parents' room is close to your room, right? You just walk a few steps and you can get to one or the other. So close, not close. Okay, next. Needle. Be careful with needles. They're very sharp, right? A needle is what maybe your mom uses to sew clothes together, or if there's a rip, sometimes people want to conserve their clothing or save their clothing. They don't want to throw it away, so they might sew up that rip in your jeans or your shirt or whatever, and they use a needle, because a needle you can go in and out through the fabric, and you can use a thread with a needle, and you can close a hole. So the thread will go here, right through there. And this is an interesting part of the needle, by the way. We call that the eye. The eye of a needle, right? A needle, of course, is a thin, sharp Be careful. This is sharp. That's a very sharp point. That's dangerous. That is sharp. So be careful with needles. It can enter your skin and ouch, it hurts. So be careful with needles. It's a thin, sharp object, usually, it can be used for other things, but usually used in sewing. Like I said, sewing, that's to repair your clothes. So you put the thread, this is the thread, you put the thread through the eye of the needle, and you use the sharp end to poke through the cloth, and you can sew up a hole in your clothing. Okay, that's a needle. Okay, let's talk about plant adaptations, and we can see how plants, there are different plant adaptations to habitats. Now, we just went over the vocabulary, but there's two more words I'd like to introduce to you guys. And the first one is adapt. Adapt means to change, but it means to change to fit or to match, especially your surroundings, right? So you adapt. You can adapt to groups of people too. You could adapt to the things that are around you. You fit in with them. So if you, if you grow up, you change according to how the things are, your environment or the people around you. You adapt. Okay, and you can adapt, maybe if you go from playing with your brothers and sisters and then you start school, you have to adapt to school. You have to change according to the school and the rules at the school. So you change. Adapt means to change. The other word is habitat. What is habitat? That's kind of an interesting word. It's a little bit of a difficult word, but it's okay. It's not that hard. Habitat is like, remember the word we just learned, environment. Okay, habitat is where a thing lives. Where does it live, right? In this case, we're talking about plants and plant habitats. So habitat is like the environment in which the plants grow up. Environment. Notice how I pronounce environment for spelling, N-M, but don't pronounce it like that. It's environment, environment. So environment is the same as habitat. We can talk about different types of habitats. This is one type of habitat. This is another type of habitat. These are three types of habitats, areas, natural areas that have certain characteristics. Okay, so how do plants change according to where they live, according to their environment, according to their habitat? Now, the first habitat is tundra. What is tundra? When I hear the word tundra, I think, ooh, cold, right? Because tundra means that the ground is frozen, right? It's very cold ground, but plants still live there. Where do we find tundra? We find tundra if you go far north, like very far north in Canada or in Russia, above the Arctic Circle, you can find tundra. But you can also find tundra in very tall mountains, right? I used to live in Colorado for a couple of years when I was a kid, and you could go hiking in the Rocky Mountains. You get so high that trees don't grow there. It's too cold for the trees, right? We call that tundra, right? And just these types of plants live there. What kinds of plants? Hairy plants. Wait, hairy, right? We talked about that before. How can plants be hairy? But some plants, it looks like hair. These plants, they're not trees, right? Like I said, it's too cold for the trees. But some types of plants that grow close to each other because it's warmer if they do that, but they're very close to each other and they might have very thin leaves that stick up, and the leaves aren't very strong, so they might move back and forth in the wind. And if you look at it on the tundra, it looks like hair moving back and forth in the wind. So it looks like hairy plants. Another example of hairy plants, not in tundra, but in a different habitat, is the desert. Because I also kind of spent some time, I was growing up in Arizona, and in Arizona there's a cactus with needles, and the cactus is covered with these needles. There are lots of them, and they're very close together, and they're white, and it looks funny. People call it the teddy bear cactus. That's not the formal name, but it's just kind of a common name for a cactus, the teddy bear cactus, because the needles are so many, it looks like hair. Of course, very dangerous. Don't touch it, because it'll grab onto your skin. It might hurt. but it's called teddy bear cholla, teddy bear cactus. And so yeah, sometimes plants can look like they have hair. It's not really hair, it just looks like hair. So we say, oh, it looks hairy, all right? It looks like it has hair. Okay, so tundra is one type of habitat. Prairie is another type of habitat. What is prairie? Prairie, remember the word we learned, flat? Right? Like I said, Kansas and Nebraska, those states, there's no mountains, there's no valleys. The land is just straight and flat. And if you go there and you look, especially in the springtime, you look at the ground, the grass and the flowers, not many trees grow on the prairie. Prairie is open, right? But it does have grass. It has little plants growing up. And as far as you can see, it's green, 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 green grass. In the spring, sometimes it's yellow with flowers, blue flowers, very beautiful. But as far as you can see, it's flat and just covered with this green grass. That's prairie. Prairie is very famous in the American West. Of course, as settlers moved from the east to the west, many American Indian tribes lived on the Prairie Indian tribes, and also buffalo lived on the prairies. Imagine these huge, huge herds of buffalo moving up and down these prairies, eating the grass. And the Indians followed the buffalo, and that's how they got their food and many of the things they needed for their life. That's prairie. Okay, so in the prairie, plants with narrow leaves grow. They're the narrow leaves plants, and also small plants. You don't see, if it's full of trees, it's not prairie, it's forest, right? And another word for forest is woodland. Woodland. So woodland, of course, can be on flat land, it can be in mountains, it can be in valleys, just an area covered with trees. We call it woodland. Now in a woodland, you notice two different types of trees. Look at the leaves on the picture on the left under woodland. You see these leaves here. They are wide, flat leaves. Canada is famous for their maple tree, right, where they get syrup. And maple leaf is on their flag. And that's the type of leaf that we're talking about. Canada is covered with woodlands. There's many woodlands, many forests in Canada. And they have these types of trees that have wide, flat leaves. They catch the rain as the rain falls. It also catches sunlight. But you notice these leaves are not green. They are yellow, and some of them are red. What's going on? Well, in the fall, these leaves they're green most of the year, right? In the springtime, they grow new leaves. They're green. Summertime, they're green. But in the fall, they turn different colors. They're very beautiful, right? In the fall, many people go to the forest, to the woodlands, to look at the trees, the changing of the leaves. But the leaves are dying. And as they die, they turn color and they fall to the ground. The tree doesn't die, right? The tree remains alive, right? But in the wintertime, the tree looks dead. It looks like a stick, with these sticks sticking off it. It's not very pretty, right? But in the spring, new leaves will grow and that cycle will repeat. So that's one type of tree. On the right side, you see a different type of tree, and you see these little needles. Instead of leaves, they don't have leaves, they have needles. Now this type of tree, we call it a special name. We call that tree an evergreen. Evergreen. And that's an interesting word. It's easy to remember. Ever, because it's always. Ever, always, it's always green. Spring, summer, fall, winter, doesn't matter. It's always green. Pine trees are very common or typical evergreens, and we find those usually in the mountains. So plants with narrow needle-shaped leaves, those are usually evergreens. Good word. Okay, next, how are some plants adapted, or how do some plants adapt to their environment? Well, like I said before, in the desert, which is another type of habitat, I already put that up there, desert. Here we see the word saguaro, not saguaro. Okay, again, I grew up in Arizona, and we had these cactus in our backyard, in our home, when I was growing up. When I was in last of elementary school and during middle school, I lived in Arizona. We moved around a lot, so that was middle school and end of elementary school. We had a home Tucson, Arizona, and we had these big cactus. Imagine looking out your back door of your home and seeing these big cactus in your backyard. That's what it was like in Arizona. They grow all over the place. But they're very tall. They're really tall. They're taller than 3 people, 3 grown men on top of each other. That's how tall they can get. And they're very heavy because a lot of it is water. But they protect that water. How do they protect that water? Because they have the needles, right? We talked about the needles. So on the evergreens, the needles, they're not too sharp. You don't have to worry about it. They look like needles. But the needles on a cactus, yes, be careful because they can prick you. They can go into your skin. So you got to be careful. Don't run into if you run into and bump into a saguaro, ow! You're going to be in pain for weeks afterwards. Thankfully, I never did that. Nobody I knew ever did that. Whew. But you got to be careful. Okay, so anyway, saguaros, these big cactus, they have a lot of water in them. So they're very heavy, but they protect that water. They don't want animals coming and drinking the water, eating them to get the water. So they protect themselves with needles. Okay, that's saguaro. Okay, goldenrod plant. That's a type of plant, usually not in the desert, maybe more prairie or maybe in the woodlands, goldenrod plants. Its stiff stems and leaves help the plant keep the water it needs to live. So the goldenrod has stiff. Stiff means it's strong. The stem is, of course, the main part of the plant, and it's stiff. It doesn't bend easily in the wind. It's stiff, it's strong. And the leaves, it also has stiff leaves. They help the plant keep the water, save the water inside of it because the plant needs that water, the water it needs to live. Over here we have stinging nettle. Sting. That doesn't sound very nice, does it? Sting means, like I said on the cactus needles, if they poke you, it's like stinging, right? But normally when we think of sting, we think of a bee. Like the bee has a needle on its bottom, right? And it can sting you. Or a scorpion. You can find scorpions where you find saguaro cactuses. You find scorpions, or the insect with a tail, and it has a stinger on the end. So it can sting you. A stinging nettle is a plant that can sting you, right? It has tiny, sharp hairs. Again, not like hair like mammals, but like a needle, like a cactus, but it's not a cactus. But they have very small thorns or needles on the stem, protect the plant from animals. And in fact, if you talk about short needles on the stem of a plant, those are usually what we call thorns. And of course, roses are famous for having thorns. So it's not really hair, it's more like a thorn, and they can stick you, and you don't want to get it on your skin. It's not as long or as dangerous as a cactus needle, but they can prick your skin, and they're not comfortable. So those are nettles. We call them nettles. Thin, sharp hairs on the stem to protect the plant from animals. So plants change in many ways depending on the environment that they are in. Does it have a lot of water in the environment? Not a lot of water? Does it have animals that are going to try to eat it for its water or not? How do they change according to their environment? Okay, well, we're going to read a passage next about these different types of plants and how they adapt. Okay, that'll be next. Okay, let's get into the reading for plant adaptations. As I read along with me. You can read out loud or in your head, practice the pronunciation. Here we go. Plants have adapted to live in their habitats. Tundras are cold and windy habitats. Okay, you can see the picture of the tundra here. Looks like it's way up north, maybe in Alaska or very far north in Canada. Okay, but anyway, those are tundras. Most tundra plants are hairy. This adaptation helps keep the plants warm. The plants grow close to each other and to the ground, and that protects them from the wind. Right? So in a very cold area, plants will be very close together and they're warm, so they help keep each other warm. They don't grow tall. You don't find many trees in the tundra. They're low plants. Okay. A prairie is a flat habitat with a lot of grass. It is hot and dry in summer. Prairie plants have narrow leaves. This helps the plant keep water. Leaves lose water, but wide leaves lose water faster than narrow leaves. Woodland trees have adapted to the environment. In winter, water can freeze and plants cannot use it. Okay, if the water is ice, the plants can't take it into their bodies. Maple trees have wide, flat leaves. The leaves drop off in fall. This helps the maple to conserve water. Conserve, keep water, right? Pine trees have narrow, needle-shaped leaves. They do not drop off, and they lose little water. So that's why some trees with the wide leaves, the leaves drop. They don't need them in the winter because they can't get the water. It's too cold. The water is frozen. But pine trees don't care, okay? Their leaves are small. They don't lose a lot of water, so they can keep them all year round. Okay, let's get into the reading skill. Now, in this case, we're talking about the main idea and the details. The main idea is that plants adapt to different habitats. Plants have adapted to live in their habitats, right? Now, the details, we can see different habitats and what are those changes? What are those adaptations? Adaptations, changes. Okay, so the first we talk about tundra plants. Tundra plants are beep and grow close to each other. Now, we talked about tundra plants. Tundra plants need to have leaves that are wide, broad? Are they tall plants? No, they're short plants, and their leaves look like what? They look like hair. So tundra plants are hairy. They are hairy. Oops, hairy. There we go. Hairy and grow close to each other. Why? Because it's warmer that way. Okay, good. That's tundra. Prairie plants. Prairie plants have beep leaves to help keep water. Now, we didn't really go over this in the vocabulary, but it was in the reading. It's, you know, if we have wide, right? Some plants like maple trees have wide leaves, but prairie plants don't have wide leaves. What is the opposite of wide in the reading? We saw the word narrow. So prairie plants have narrow leaves. Narrow. Narrow is the opposite of wide. Prairie plants have narrow leaves because it keeps the water, right? Big leaves, there's a lot of water can evaporate from the leaves if it's very sunny and very dry. And as we saw in the summertime on the prairie, it's hot and dry, not a lot of water. So plants need to keep their water. They have narrow leaves. Okay, good. Now, next we have maple trees, and we're talking about woodlands, of course. In woodlands and where we see maple trees beep water when leaves drop off in the fall. So I just talked about prairie plants having narrow leaves because they want to save water. They want to keep their water. Maple leaves have big wide leaves, so they lose water, right? When the sun's out, when it's hot and dry. But in the winter, they can't use water, right? The leaves can't take in water, so they don't really need their leaves anyway. So if they can't take in the water, but they're losing water, right? They're not saving their water. So what do maple trees do? They conserve water. They keep their water. They save their water when leaves drop off in the fall. And conserve is our vocabulary word, conserve. And that is why maple trees, elm trees, oak trees, the wide-leaved trees lose the leaves in the fall. It's very beautiful in the fall. So maple trees conserve water when leaves drop off in the fall, turn color and drop off. Now, pine trees don't worry about that. They're not worried because they don't have wide leaves. Pine trees have narrow leaves, so they beep little water. So what is the opposite of conserve? They don't have to worry about conserving water because they don't lose water. They lose little water. They lose little. Not a lot. They lose a little bit. Not a big deal. We don't have to worry, right? Our leaves are very small. They're like needles. They're not wide. We don't lose a lot of water. We lose little water. Lose little water is the opposite of lose a lot of water. So pine trees don't worry. They have the leaves, the green leaves, all year round, so they are called evergreens. They are always green. Evergreen trees. Okay. So in this unit, we talked about different types of plants. We talked about, grasses. We talked about trees, different types of trees, and we talked about how they change and how they are different, how they adapt to their environments, their habitats. So plant adaptations. How do plants change according to their environments? How do plants adapt to their habitats? Okay, so it's an interesting lesson. We learned a lot about different types of plants and ways plants change according to the environment, which is basically part of the natural world. Everything you see in nature is adapted or has adapted over a very long time to suit itself, to match itself to the environment in which it lives. Okay, interesting lesson. I hope you learned a lot with me. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.